everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dr. Jill Live. Today, I have special guest, Dr. Tom Moorcroft. And
hello, everybody. Welcome to another
here goes my
episode
echo.
of
Let me
Dr.
get
Jill
that.
Live.
I'm going to start over for the sake of recording, even if you've heard me live. So welcome to another episode of Dr. Jill Live. Today, I have my guest, Dr. Tom Moorcroft. And we both love to ski. So we were just talking before we get on here, because you're in Utah, right, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you in Park City or?
Yeah,
Okay.
Right on the outskirts. Beautiful place to be.
Awesome. And we're going to hopefully get together this winter and we'll do some study of complex chronic illness on the slopes. How's that sound? Oh, awesome. So as you all know, you can find any of my episodes on Stitcher or iTunes or YouTube. Please jump in there and rate and review and subscribe. But today it is absolutely my honor to introduce my guests. We're going to be talking about glymphatic function, probably something you've not heard much about yet, but Dr. Tom is an expert, and this will really shed some light on complex chronic illness. Many of you out there, please say hello, tell us where you're from, have suffered from Lyme disease or co-infections, but Babesia, Bartonella, or anything else. It's carried by a tick or a spider or a mosquito, etc., or mold-related illness. A lot of you have suffered from that, and you know my own story with that as well. But the interesting thing today is we're going to dive deep into the brain and the glymphatic function. I'll let Tom really explain what this is. And you might find some new pearls or tips or things that would help you with these complex chronic illnesses. So please say hello, tell us where you're from, and we will jump right in. Dr. Tom treats some of the sickest and most sensitive patients suffering from chronic Lyme disease, other tick-borne co-infections, mold-related illness, as well as children with infection-induced autoimmune encephalitis, also known as PAN and PANDAS. He specializes in optimizing glymphatic function, the brain's detox system. So that's what we're going to talk about today. He's also the creator of the Lyme Disease Practitioner Certification and Mentorship Program and co-founder of Meditation RX, an online community using specifically designed meditations to awaken, healing, and overcome chronic conditions. Dr. Tom, I always have so much fun talking to you. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Dr. Jill. It's so nice to be here. It's an honor, and hopefully we'll have a really cool conversation, shed some light on some things, and give people some practical tips to help move their healing forward.
Yeah, I know that we will, and I'm so excited to talk to you. We recently both spoke at the ICI conference, and you gave great information. So let's start, though. I always love to start with, like, how did you get here? How did you get into this? Tell us a little bit about your story and your own journey, because often, as we talked before we get on, this sheds the light and kind of like gives us and brings that passion and purpose to our lives, even though sometimes it's through suffering, right?
Right. Well, yeah, and sometimes through that suffering, we get the greatest learning and greatest sort of like calling, we realize. And so I was actually at the University of Vermont. I just loved playing outside, hiking and skiing and all the good stuff that we always talk about. And I was on a wilderness trip and I got injured, and I was just like, it was somebody playing a practical joke in a situation where you shouldn't have. And so I just was, I was very interested in medicine at that point, just from a prevention perspective, but not really being a doctor, because the reason I went to school was to get into ecology and save the planet. So I was talking to all these adults who were like, my age and older, and we were like doing the research. And every time I talked to people, they were like lame. They just wanted to talk about research and not actually take like real action. So I said to myself, like, who will take real action? And it's the kids, right? Kids get passionate, and then you can change the way they act for the rest of their lives. And so I went to the Institute of Ecosystem Studies in Millbrook, New York. I think they changed their name to the Carey Institute. But basically, I went there to teach outdoor education and learn how to do it better, so that I could really work with the kids and get them excited about, integrating my passion for outside into their lives, if that was also something they liked. And during that time, I ended up, my boss found me one day after being a super high performer. She came over to me and she's like, you're not getting any work done. What's going on? And I need this in an hour. So she comes back to my desk about an hour later, and I'm staring at the wall, and there's literally a puddle of drool all over my chest and my belly. And she's like, I think you need to go to the doctor. And so, at that point I was kind of like lost. So I went to the doctor, and within—
And about what age were you, Tom? I'm sorry.
23.
Okay.
23.
Young. Yeah.
Yeah, super young. And so the guy goes, here's your doxycycline because you've got classic Lyme disease, and take 10 days and you'll be fine. And so I laid on the floor for 4 days. And at 23, my parents had to help me to the bathroom. And I had drenching sweats alternating with freezing cold shakes. But then, 10 days later, I felt fine. And then over the next 8 years, they decided that as brain fog, fatigue, and joint pain crept in, and ultimately irritability, because no one could tell me what was wrong, that I was depressed, and then I was bipolar, and then I had ADHD. And then ultimately, my favorite was, I go to my primary, I said, look, I've done all the meds. I've done everything you guys have asked for the last like 5.5 years. Please help me. And I said, I have brain fog, fatigue, and, this horrible joint and muscle pain, and I need help. And he goes, I know, you have fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. And I was just like, you gotta be kidding me.
Labels, right?
Labels with no way, like it didn't give me a new way to figure out how to get better or even what the underlying cause was. So I kind of just gave up on everything, and I kind of went inside and started, I was in medical school at this point because I kind of had switched a little with my own health. I was like, I got to look into this. And somebody gave me a yoga DVD one day. And so I just looked at it and really dove deep into Ashtanga yoga. And I started to notice that my body hurt less as I started to stretch just gently. And granted, guys, I could only touch my kneecaps. I was 20. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty pathetic, right? I mean, I had been an athlete until all this happened. So, but still, that was way tight. But anyway, Jill, in the end, it was like my brain couldn't calm down until I did like 6 or 8 months of yoga. Then I could sit and I could start to really feel it. And what was interesting is, even though I was in medical school at an osteopathic school, we were at the time, I think, one of 13 that had a nutrition class, but it was like a pamphlet like this big, and really it was like B12 is this. I started to change my diet before I even knew anybody who knew about diet, because my body had said so. And so I went into medical practice. I thought I was going to be an osteopath who did, essentially cranial sacral work and get paid to meditate. And here's your vitamin D and let's get the energy flowing better. But I found one person who had Lyme disease, and they just felt different than everybody else I treated. Didn't know who to send her to. And I remembered back to when I was sick. And I was like, I'm going to help you out, even though I didn't even know what I was doing, because I had only been taught the old stuff. So that started it. And I helped her. She referred one person, and then the rest of it is just history. And, you just dive in, and I knew how she was suffering, and I didn't want her to have to suffer for as long as I did. And so I just kind of grabbed the bull by the horns. And so here we are today.
Oh, Dr. Tom, thanks for sharing that, because there's so much compassion and love for you, for your story, and for what you've been through, because that's often, as healers, I really feel like our souls are kind of called to that. We don't really know it until we hit our 20s or 30s and find out, oh, we're actually supposed to do this. But part of a healer's journey is suffering. It's part of our school, our education. And I have suffered a lot as well: breast cancer, Crohn's, mold-related illness, Lyme and co-infections.
Holy moly.
And the truth is, it was so hard in those times. But when I sit in front of a patient and they're describing their journey through cancer, their journey through Crohn's, or their journey through mold, there's such a depth of understanding. Often I'll shed a tear because I feel them. And I know, like you said, that
right
suffering,
in your soul, right?
It does. And you're like, and for both of us, I think there's this passion of what can we possibly do to help the world, because there is so much suffering. So I love that. I hate that you had to suffer, but I love that it brings the heart of a healer to your practice. And even that curiosity, right? Like that's the other driving factor in your story. There was this clear pattern of this curiosity, like what else? This doesn't make sense. Fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue are just labels. They're good labels. Right. They describe something. They don't tell us why. So yes. you obviously, I love the way you got into it, because it was much more of a meditative mind-body piece. I love that, because I really feel like the next level of healing is this stuff we're talking about. So let's talk briefly about what would you prescribe? How would you do mind-body yoga, those pieces? And then let's go right into glymphatic and how those two, like when did you discover glymphatics?
Yeah, they tie in so well. And it's interesting because in the, as you know, like I love telling my story because it really motivates people and we can connect. And the other part is, when I was young, I could feel I was so connected to the planet, and I was kind of trained out of it, right? Like being so connected with not just the physical and the emotional, but the spiritual and the energetics of who we are. And I think that was part of the reason I went through all this, because, we talk a lot about disease and dis-ease and hyphenating it. And I was in a state of imbalance. And I find that a lot of my patients, it's like, I don't think that they deserve Lyme or mold illness. I don't want
Right.
them to suffer at all. But they can also look at it and say, where was my life out of balance that made me a little more susceptible than maybe my neighbor? And
Yeah.
how can I learn from that and then inspire others? So, I'd always been kind of more spiritual than religious, even though I kind of grew up in a religious household. And I just wanted more. And like, I would be out hiking and I was like, the energy and the connection, the ground into the planet. So I'd always been drawn to it. And the thing that was interesting, I think, Dr. Jill, was like when I was type A, I'm like mountain biking and I'm racing and I'm in medical school, and it's just like, pile it on, because I said I could never calm my brain down. And I programmed myself to believe I was ADHD and I couldn't calm down. But my nervous system was so hijacked by the way I thought and also what other people had labeled me as, like with the ADHD. And yeah, I'm not the world's most focused person, but it's like a superpower, and we all have our own unique superpower. So when I started to get into the yoga, what was interesting was the energy that was flowing was just not flowing everywhere. And when I was able to open it up and allow it to flow where it wanted to, which also at times I had to experience some uncomfortable moments, and just allow myself to understand it's part of healing, like being able to eventually, in about 8 months, put my chin on my knees from not barely being able to touch them. There's a lot of discomfort along the way, but I learned that it's interesting. I had a really great teacher, and he said that yoga should be it's movement on breath at the beginning levels.
Yes.
So he said, if you're not able to fully breathe, you're pushing too hard.
Mm.
And I had never really found a gauge to understand when I should push and when I shouldn't. And I've just taken that lesson into the work that you and I do in understanding that sometimes we got to push a little bit, but sometimes we got to put the brakes on, and that gets us to the end faster. And this breathing, it was like, oh my God, now the energy can do its healing work, whether that's a Herxheimer reaction or I'm just stretching and breathing into it. And once the energy started to flow, I actually could understand what was just me not allowing it to do its work and what needed to kind of be treated and go away. And so I was able to learn a respect for the way my body was healing itself and realize my body hadn't betrayed me.
Yes.
It was really working so hard to heal me. It was my mind assuming it knew the answer. That was more of the accidental betrayal, if you will.
Oh, Dr. Tom, I love what you're saying. I can so relate on so many levels. And the things that come to mind are, number one, that left brain, right? Like, we're in medical school, and I come from like this analytical engineer family, and they're brilliant. I love them, but I thought I was one of them. And I was actually this like hippie, rebel, spiritual, creative, and I was in that family. So I tried to become that. I tried to suppress my sensitive nature, my right side, my creative side. And I tried to become this. I went into bioengineering, medical school, very masculine, very allopathic, very driven. And I suppressed this other side. And now, we were just talking before, I'm writing a book, doing a documentary. I'm becoming this much more creative artist. And we were just talking about creating space for that too, right? And that's my true nature. But it's actually this combination, because in medical school, I don't know about you, but it sounds like our experience is similar. Is it's so driven by the analytical left mind that you start to not trust your intuition, and you start to lose touch with your spiritual self. And as I've gotten reacquainted with that part of myself and become more kind to that part of myself, instead of saying, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about, and integrated these right and left parts, I have so much more wisdom to help patients. I have so much more healing within myself. And I hear that in your same journey, like how you touch base with nature, how you were so connected. I feel that too. And I think that's the spiritual right brain creative part of ourselves, but there's wisdom there, right? And we kind of say, oh, well, that's not, because that's not medicine, that's not wise. But the truth is, those two together breathe brilliance as far as solutions. So that's number one. Number two, I hear you saying, like me, we're driven, we're pushing, and what we are is we're putting this sympathetic system in a tone that's like way up here, right? Like if it's like a scale of 0 to 10, we're at a 9 all the time. And that literally will completely suppress our immune system. And our limbic system is completely fight or flight all the time. We can't heal there. And what you're talking about is the same path I've found to healing, is like going down. But what happens is, if you have old trauma or old pain or old suffering, when you're at a high state, like a 9 out of 10, you just suppress that. You don't feel it. I didn't have anger. I didn't have sadness for years. I didn't have pain. But when you start to down level, whether it's yoga or meditation or sitting with yourself or being quiet or being in nature, the stuff bubbles up, right? And it's uncomfortable. So we have to be okay which with a level of not only uncertainty, but uncomfortable and anger and sadness and all these emotions. But as we do that, it's almost like the most kind thing we can do to our body, because it's saying, I trust you to be okay, even if it's sad, even if it's painful, even if it's hard. And our body will literally, our soul will respond by helping us to heal.
It's so true. And, it's interesting because as we keep trying to steer ourselves towards the glymphatics, which this whole conversation actually does, one of the things that comes up so much for me is the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism when we talk about safety in the limbic system. And what's interesting was, in my life, when there's a big change, a lot of times I've taken the time, I've done everything right. I've done the, even the other day, like I didn't sleep. I don't have sleep issues. I sleep great. But I was up all night and I was like, what just happened? And then I was a little irritable the next day. And my wife goes to me like, every time you get really close and you do some deep work, this happens. And a lot of people will experience right as they're about to make this huge shift, something kind of really big blocks their way. And I've heard it described many ways, but I love the safety conversation, because if we can't understand we're safe, we can't heal. And the areas of the brain that allow us to understand we're safe are also ones that Lyme has been shown to negatively impact. So Lyme physically could put you in this unsafe zone. And I would be willing to bet that things like Bartonella and even mycotoxins, if we did enough SPECT scans, we'd find that out. But I was thinking about this a lot. I'm like, it's almost like that self-sabotage. And why does it happen so frequently in our people? And why does the community talk a lot about kind of like this illness mentality? And what I realize is that it's about familiarity and unfamiliarity. And when you're a kid, like our kids want to watch the same show over and over. They want to watch the same movie. They want to listen to the same music. And the adults are like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But it's familiar, so it's safe.
Yeah.
And that's just a normal developmental thing. So if you think about like when I got Lyme disease, when I was first sick, I was so pissed off. I was like, I'm sick and I need to get better. But as I'm chronically sick over time, that actually becomes a more familiar state than wellness. And so by accident and through evolution, my nervous system and my heart, even to some degree, starts to view that as safe. So now when we treat someone and we get them better, or they take a big step forward, or they have a flare, a Herxheimer type thing, that's no longer safe. And you're like, why don't you want to get better? That's what you came to me for. But it's an interesting piece of how the limbic system works with safety. Yeah. And so I always try to get people to work on the things that they love in life and focus on that, so that even when these moments come up, they can go back to that sense of love and gratitude. Because as you mentioned, we see that our immune system gets suppressed by stress. And when we're in love and gratitude, even if we just have to set a reminder on our phone to get us there for a moment a day, we get that immune boost, and we can improve things like heart rate variability. And these are all really important, because in the end, when we go and look at glymphatic function, everybody wants to detoxify, and I'm like, the first thing you need to detoxify is your emotions and your trauma and all that, unless you're in the acute state. But then it's like, let's look at how we actually detoxify the body. And as an osteopath, I'm so fortunate. We look at how the body functions, and so the lymphatic system is how we get all those toxins out. And in our arms and legs, it's about muscle contraction and movement. And in our midsection here, in our chest and our belly and our pelvis, and thinking about even healing people with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, it's pressure gradient changes. So then we need to breathe deeply, which is why all of us are saying, hey, breathe into your belly, allow your pelvic floor to descend, and find time. Because not only is that going to calm your solar plexus, which is kind of like your second brain area, the nervous system of the gut, but it'll physically clean things up. But as it'll tone down the nervous system, then it feeds back to calming the vagus nerve, which then gets us into the head. And the way the head drains and we detoxify our brain isn't through supplements or IVs. Primarily, it's through sleep and deep sleep. Mm-hmm. And so there's this cool system that we've been talking about, that glymphatic. Mm-hmm. So, and what happens is there's arteries all through our brain, and they're along the side of them, we've got the cerebrospinal fluid comes in, and it moves into the brain substance, and actually just kind of like creates a fluid wave with this interstitial fluid. And essentially both of these are almost completely water. So the water inside the head, and we're just pushing through the brain between arteries and the veins. And then along the sides of the veins, this water drains, and that dirty water comes out along a lot of our cranial nerves, especially about 30% through our nose.
Wow.
So it's kind of but none of this will function well unless, let me step back. It doesn't function optimally unless we're getting good sleep. So that's how, when we're working on our spirituality, our energy, and calming, going from that sympathetic or that really frozen parasympathetic down to the joy and the love, gratitude part of the parasympathetics, that's actually one of our best brain detoxifiers and drainers, is because it calms the nervous system so we can start to sleep better.
Wow. So this is huge. So lymphatics are the drainage system that's outside the blood vessels, kind of like the lymphatics of the brain, if I'm saying that
Correct.
right.
Absolutely.
A really simplified version. And again, it's draining toxins and all that stuff that's happening. It's while we sleep, and deep sleep is key. So Tom, we have a lot of patients who did our tracking, like with their Oura ring or whatever, and either aren't getting good deep sleep or getting like 5-10 minutes a night. Where do you start with people who aren't getting good deep sleep? Because that's a big question. I bet a lot of listeners are curious about what you have to say.
Oh my gosh, right? And again, like the famous functional medicine responses, well, it kind of depends.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's very specific, but I mean, there's definitely some things. I mean, we look at sleep hygiene. I mean, certainly there's so many, your bed is for two things when you're an adult: sleep and sex. And if you're a kid, it's for just one of those, and it's not the second one. And so we need to create like a sleep sanctuary. And so for me, cool, dark rooms help you sleep. I have sleep routines, and I really recommend people, and sleep routines start hours before bed. So we want to get off the screens whenever we can. If we absolutely can't, we want to have blue blockers or removing the blue from our screen, but we want to have a de-stress ritual. And one of the things that I notice is that, like, a lot of my patients tell me that they have a hard time sleeping, and then they tell me on and on and on about how hard it is to get to sleep. And I'm like, well, what about all the good things that go on in your life? And so I think about updating my operating system. What are those constant thoughts I'm thinking about over and over? And if they're saying I can't go to sleep, well, then maybe I might want to change that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I have
it's like neurolinguistic programming, right? We say that, and our subconscious is like, well, you said you can't sleep, so I must make that happen, and then it's done. We can't sleep. So I love that. Thought that we could retrain and actually verbalize a more positive.
Yeah, and just like think about whatever is in your head or in your mouth, like, or coming out of your mouth, is literally the program that you're running all day long. So think about what your program is. Tell your doctor and maybe a support person that either, your basic symptoms, and then let it go. We have a patient commitment agreement when people come to see me. And part of our agreement is that you get to tell me your full story exactly that many times, just once. Wow. And outside of that, I want you to make a commitment to yourself that after you write it down and we have it documented, that you're allowing it to go, because you put it in our hands and we have it safe in our medical record. So it's there for anyone who needs it. And then the only time we go back to it is if we need it for medical treatment. And then we go back to focusing on what you want, which is like good sleep. And one of the, being the medical school type person that we talked about earlier, I like to make things really complicated. So then I said, okay, I've done all this training and all kinds of things, but it's so hard to get to that question of like, how do I just get to bed? So one of my favorite things to do is really simple. At the end of the day, I give myself 3 to 4 minutes, and I grab a piece of paper, and paper is better than like a tablet, obviously. And I write down 3 wins for the day. And I just write down 3 things that are great. And if I had a really lousy day, I just write down 3 lessons, because those are sometimes the biggest wins. And then what you realize is that sometimes it doesn't have to be a big win. It's just recognizing you had wins. Yeah. And then what I do is I look those over, and then I write down 3 wins I'm going to have for tomorrow. And I think about the things that I just want to get done. And then I just put it down and I go to bed. And then everybody's like, well, like, why do you write down the 3 wins for tomorrow? And part of that is because as soon as I say, tomorrow I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, your conscious mind starts to say how you're not going to do it. Like, tomorrow night, I'm going to sleep well. Well, immediately you're going to be, well, in the past, I haven't slept well. And you can't do that because you're going to be stressed out. And so what's really cool is when you eventually fall asleep, you dissociate from your conscious mind. And then your subconscious actually gets tapped into superconscious knowledge. And now you can create this. And now if you just bear with me for a couple of days and do this, what you'll find is when you wake up in the morning, you read them over. So that's 15 seconds. So you spend all of 3 minutes and 15 seconds planning. And by the end of the day, like 3 or 4, you're going to not be able to do 3 because you're going to have 20 wins for the day, and you're going to just be planning your whole next day. Because it just, and what's really cool is you start to see the gratitude build for these little wins, because you're savoring it. It's like you take a sip of wine, and instead of just chugging it, you're like, you just taste it, and you just let all the flavors change over time. And then what will happen 3 or 4 days in is you'll feel this lovely energy in your heart, and all your energy will sink and you'll ground, and you'll take a nice deep breath and go, oh, and my life is really got some good stuff in it. And there are also some bad things. And then sleep starts to get easier. But it's like, sometimes it's like work. Like when I did the yoga, or if you want to run a marathon, or for some of us, we want to go from our couch to our bathroom and back. We have to work out a little bit to do that. So work out that mental, emotional muscle so that your brain wants you to heal and your heart wants you to heal. And so just look at it, and then, like, even as I'm talking about it, my energy is getting so calm, and I'm like, I want to go to bed now.
I know. No, I love that, because you do. And we see what we're programmed to see. So if you're always looking for what's wrong, you're always looking for bad's going to happen. You're always looking for the storm that's going to come. You're going to see it. You're going to see it. But if we shift our view to look for, I literally have a friend who's very negative, and I asked, whenever I talk to her, I ask at the end of the day, what was the best thing that happened to you today? And for a while, it's like, there's just silence, right? Like, and now it's like, I'm kind of helping to shift that to more like what good happened today versus all the bad. And it really does make a difference. And then, like you said, I love the subconscious has no brain of its own. Like the conscious argument is all of our consciousness, right? The subconscious will just do what we tell it to do. It doesn't argue, it doesn't question. And years ago, when I was suffering from Crohn's and trying to reprogram some of my brain, I would take walks and I would say, every day in every way, I'm stronger and healthier, wealthier and more resilient, younger and more beautiful. I will overcome all obstacles. I will outlast all adversity. Things are turning in my favor. And literally every one of those things has started to, like, I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm stronger, I'm healthier, all the things that I'd said really are manifesting, and it just started to become part of, like, I can say it without thinking now. And sometimes when I walk upstairs, it'll just come to mind. But what happened is that my subconscious just took it and ran with it. And like, we've got to make these things happen because Jill says it's true.
Right. It's really interesting too, because like there's so many little tidbits where you can play around with this. But one of the things I did was every time I came to a stoplight, I would feel my energy. But it was in my body, because I'm very empathic. So a lot of us who are empathic, and a lot of people with chronic illness either were empathic or they get turned on to their empathy. And then they get flooded from outside, because a lot of empaths lose their barrier.
Yes.
Like, so it's almost like the edge of our aura is like not quite
permeable, right?
It's very permeable because we haven't decided how to turn it up and down when we need to. And so we have to learn that. And with chronic illness, it's like, boom, oh my goodness, it's on. And so one of the things I did was just ground in my body and start to be aware of it. But the one thing that, as you were talking about that I really remembered was, I would find it was great almost everywhere except there's a couple of spots. And so one of the things I learned was that if I can just say that those areas of energy that really aren't me, and they're kind of stuck, but they're also maybe from outside, like maybe from Lyme or from mold even, those have 100%, it's totally cool for them to exist. I totally respect their existence, but they're just not welcome in my energy and in my body anymore. Because it's okay for you to be out in the ether or wherever, but it's just not in me. And it allowed me to really get this thing and to feel grounded, because a lot of us just our boundaries get so lost because we're just looking everywhere, and we're like emotional sieves when we're not feeling well. That's the beauty of it, is we can learn to be in that place. And from a sleep perspective, I have people who still have a hard time. And if you're just an insomnia person because you stay up too late or you're on TV too much, I'm like, hey, get up in the morning a little early and go exercise. Well, a lot of our people can't do that. So I've created meditations where we have binaural beats that actually, if you put your headphones on, help your brain calm down.
Love this. Talk a little, I'm totally on board. I love those. Well, just a little bit about, because it's different frequencies in the ears, right?
Yeah. And it's just like, if you want to get to a certain a delta brain frequency or whatever, which is getting you to deep sleep, I like doing simple math rather than the math that the people who make these tracks do. But it's like, essentially you have 14 beats over here, you've got 10 beats over here. these cool parts of your brain called the olives of all places in your brain actually will just subtract it out and just leave you with 4.
Cool.
And so you're basically, when they talk about binaural beats or brainwave entrainment, while listening to this, they actually can slowly and but surely bring those frequencies closer. And so your brain subtracts it down, down, down until you're kind of resonating with sound, which brings your frequency of your brain waves down. And then before you know it, you're falling asleep. And I couple that with meditation tracks where I'm walking people through a lot, like the one that I like the most and my patients seem to give me the best feedback on, and is like we walk through different areas of your body and just letting them become more fluid and releasing any of the tension that you have. And then in that particular going to bed, I kind of let go of the energy talk and we just really allow it to be about fluidity and relaxation. And then people are finding that they're falling asleep that way as well.
That makes so much sense. I love that you do that for patients. And I love the binaural beats because I've always felt like those have been really helpful. Do you ever recommend, like for me, the PEMF mats? Some of those frequencies are really, I sleep well, so I'm one of those fortunate. That's not my area. But when I track it, I went from, like I say, an hour and a half of deep sleep, which was great for 7 hours, to all of a sudden like 2 or 3 hours of deep in maybe 5.5 hours. So it would like compressed, and I would have like 30, 40, sometimes 50% deep sleep, which is to me crazy.
Holy crap.
Like, yeah,
That's
literally I'll get a
amazing.
50% night at 5. And what happens with that is I normally get 7 hours and I need about 7 hours, 6 3/4. But on those nights when I get a lot of deep, I can wake up at 5.5 hours and feel like amazing. Because,
Boom.
of course, right? I've had all that deep. Yeah, I feel like superhuman in the sleep realm because I've got that hack. And for me, the mat was the thing that really shifted it.
I think that's so key because I definitely use PEMFs, and I have a mat, I've got a little portable device. I mean, I
Yep.
just think for the right now, some of my patients are super
Don't you think
sensitive.
empaths, I'm sorry, but like, don't you think we are probably more sensitive than the average person because we feel the energy?
Well, and it's interesting because some of my people feel it and they're like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. Oh my God. And I'm like, because I feel it too. I actually can feel
Yeah.
it from across the room when you're
Yeah.
on it and your body loves it. And you just, but you're moving like I was in the beginning when that energy starts to move
Yeah.
and in more natural ways, you don't know, you're not comfortable with it. So it's that unfamiliar lack of safety thing.
Yeah.
So we work in that direction. But yeah, I love PEMF and so many different frequencies, and the Shulman resonance are,
Yeah,
Shulman
that's
are
the one I use to get the sleep.
holy
Is the
moly,
Chauvin,
right? It's
right?
just like
It's like
humming in the
grounding us.
embryo.
Totally. And for those who don't know, Schumann frequency is basically the Earth's magnetic. So if you walk barefoot on the beach or you like are actually in nature, you're probably getting some of that. And if you love nature or feel calm by nature, like both Tom and I do, that's probably a piece of, for me, that's the frequency that gives me the best deep sleep.
Absolutely. And then I also have a sort of a higher end grounding pad because I looked at a lot of the, I actually take the all my tri-field meter and then all these
Yeah.
other millivolt meters, and I've tried multiple ones, and I found one that really works to bring down the actual EMFs rather than just saying it. And so I'm recharging myself with the negative ions from the planet every single night. And I'm also protecting myself to some degree from the EMFs around me. Oh, and oh my gosh, I almost forgot one of my favorite tips is talking about EMFs and electricity. Wi-Fi is terrible for sleep.
Yeah.
So, but you don't have to worry about it because it's not about none. It's just like even mold exposure. It's not about none. I think of it as two things. Like we've got an ability to deal with crap and we have an amount of crap to deal with. And when the amount of crap you have to deal with is above what you can, well, then that's what you feel like. And so we have just two goals, bring down the amount of crap and improve our ability to tolerate it if we want to really simplify it. So from a Wi-Fi perspective, a lot of people with inflammatory diseases and even like rheumatoid or lupus and a lot of these other things, if we took the red blood cells and we did a live smear, you'll see stacking of red cells, often called rouleau bodies. It's really interesting. If you do that to someone pre and post Wi-Fi exposure, if you turn on the Wi-Fi router, you'll actually see your red cells stack as if you had inflammation. And you can actually look at brain wave studies and see that there's more irritability. But the beauty about Wi-Fi is the distance is huge. So this is why we want all the electronics out of your room in general. But the other part is for Wi-Fi routers, I just tell people to get a timer so that they can set it and forget it. And at whatever time is bedtime, generally you have it turn off and then you have it turn on a few minutes after you wake up. That way, everybody in the house gets to calm down and sleep better, and you don't have to think about it and remember to do it every night. And it's
That's brilliant, because I've heard of switches and stuff, but again, unless you have a switch wired by your bed, the timer is brilliant. I love that idea. I really
it's
do.
like $8 or something, and you have it for the rest of your life. You know, it
Brilliant.
works so easy. Thank you.
Because I have actually right beside me a professional grade Wi-Fi meter for RF. So I actually test these things, and sadly my house is not wired yet. It's still Wi-Fi. Fortunately, I'm not super sensitive, but I know I could feel better if I
Right.
did
Well,
that.
and the cool part, Jill, is like when I have a lot of people who live like in New York City and stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
And they're like, well, what about that? I can't get away from it. I turn my phone on, I see 75 Wi-Fi. I'm like, great, that's not a problem, because it's about distance. And
Yes. Yes.
we live in a world where we don't need to be afraid of everything.
Right.
We could be, but we're not going to change the rest of New York City. But we can we can just give our immune system and our nervous system a little more calm. And that's really what it is little things add up in my experience. And so
just to
you don't
summarize, your router distance from your human body, that's what you're talking about. So if you either have
Yes.
it in the farthest room from your bedroom, or you turn it off at night, or both. And same with the phone, I've noticed a massive difference in sleep, of course, when my phone is off. So and it's not even nowadays, the high end 12, 13, 14 iPhones sometimes still transmit when they're off. So like you have to be really careful. There's I won't even go into
and
that.
there's like, I know I have
Or
mine.
I should say on airplane mode. I should clarify that. There are, I think some of the newer ones are actually transmitting when they're off, but either way, at least turn them off. Or
yeah, and like, I have a mom who's almost 83. I've got, brothers and family members with younger kids and everything. So I like 12. I've always heard about 12 feet away from your bed's pretty good. So I put mine on airplane mode, and so it's Wi-Fi turned off on the phone, Bluetooth turned off on the phone, and I put it on do not disturb. And my favorites are only the emergency people, because we don't have regular phones anymore. So I just put it pretty far away, as if it's almost in the other room. But the other part that's really interesting, I have a video of this somewhere. We were testing the grounding pads to see how well they really work. My daughter, on one of those torchlight lamps with the dimmer, my daughter grabbed the thing and we got a baseline reading. She walked over to it and hugged it, and it was like 13,000 millivolts. It was insane. It was like the thing made a noise I'd never heard before. So one of the things that we think about is trying to keep the head of our bed away from the the outlets.
yes.
But the thing to remember is whatever you plug into that wire becomes another transmitter. So not to go crazy and paranoid, but just if you have a light by your bed, have it going away, not closer.
Yeah.
Just
and
little
I
things.
can totally vouch for that, because I've had a professional building biologist come in and assess, and the head of my bed, which has an outlet, which has my lamp and my phone cord charger and about 5 things plugged into it, was like the highest by a long shot compared to everywhere else. So I did the same thing. I pulled the plugs and put them away from the bed. And even that, these small things, it doesn't have to be, surround yourself with aluminum foil. Right.
It's so funny, like years ago, like this is funny, at Mindshare one time, they were asking for social media haters and just to kind of send something in. And I had done a talk for iLads about this. And I said, look, a lot of my patients feel better. When I first learned about, this is another thing that people should be aware of with sleep, because now I sleep great. I've slept great for 15 years. I haven't had it. Well, actually, no, 12 years. I haven't had and before I forget, I had 13 years from the tick bite and infection. 8 years later, got diagnosed. And then it was 13 years till I was symptom free, but I've been 15 years. Sorry, I keep saying 15. I just realized I've been practiced 15 years
I know, right?
last week, but 13 years symptom free.
Wow, that's amazing.
So you can get better. And part of that is just, I lost track of the other part. Oh, sleep. When I first started to sleep, Joe, I was 4 hours, 12 hours. It didn't matter. I said sleep when you're dead. But when I learned the importance of sleep for brain detoxification, I started to go on this mission to learn how to sleep. For the first 10 months, I was more tired in the morning. But I started getting energy at the end of the day. And after that 10-month period, so over that 10-month period, I would get better and better energy. And then ultimately I woke up rested, but my body had a sleep debt. And so if you're getting better sleep through all the things that we're talking about, your meditation practice, maybe your supplements or peptides or whatever you're using, or just turning off your Wi-Fi, you will probably be more tired for a while as your body is getting more and more sleep and wants more and more to heal. And then the other thing that so it's normal to actually feel more tired when your sleep treatment is working for a while. And then what was really interesting was my sleep had gotten better. And I went to a conference where I learned about all this Wi-Fi stuff. So I go home, like turn off my Wi-Fi router. I did not sleep for 2 weeks. I had the horrible insomnia. And it was like
Your body,
detoxification.
it's that 9 out of 10, right? Your body's here like, what the heck just happened? Right.
Right, it is. And so then, but 2 weeks later, I felt fine. And then like 3 weeks, you know, so then I'm sleeping great again. And then all of a sudden I'm up all night and I'm like, what? And this happened 3 or 4 times. And then I go, hey, wait, let me see if I didn't turn off the Wi-Fi. And I forgot to turn off the Wi-Fi. So whenever the Wi-Fi is left on, I'm kind of awake.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's really interesting. So it's just to be aware of, that's where I came up with put a timer on it. So
brilliant. Best tip of the whole thing. So as we truly, well, there's all kinds of good tips. I didn't mean it that way, but I mean, like, that's a really practical one. I'm going to go do that. So let's just kind of summarize and leave. I would love to leave listeners with what's the most important thing if people are like, where do I start? We talked about sleep, but what's kind of just takeaway? Give us a little takeaway point here.
I remember really clearly standing in my apartment in medical school going, I can't believe, I mean, at this point, I might have been 27, 28, and I've been 5 years into this journey of just a shit show and feeling crappy. And I just remember really clearly going, I saw my whole life in front of me, and I was like, I've got 2 choices. And what I feel like right now is giving up and just crawling in a hole. Or I just say, I already feel that way, and there is no way in hell I'm not making it to my dreams. I was newly married. I wanted a family. I loved playing outside, and all those things seemed to be going away from me. And the moment I said it was more important to me to focus on what I wanted than describing my illness, and because I'm never going to forget about my illness, right? It's there. Like, we're not pretending it doesn't exist. In fact, that tells me where my biggest growth potential is. But I just clearly remember the exact moment that, just like with my wife, the second that we knew that we were meant to be together, it was the exact same moment for both of us. And this moment of healing, it was, when we talk about quantum leaps in healing or quantum leaps in anything, I think it's more the quantum leap is the instant you make the decision that you are worthy of having all your goals, you are worthy of healing, and that no matter how hard it is, you're going to give it the shot to go there. Because then it opened up all the doors where I learned all this stuff. Before that, I was just struggling. And it's not to say just think about the positive thing and you'll get better, because yeah, that might work, but realistically, you need to do a lot of stuff.
Right.
But it just gave me it gave me hope rather than hopeless. And when we look at the way the brain functions in safety, hopeless is without hope. And when we move to hope and gratitude and just the joy of the possibility, that shifts our immune system up. It shifts our heart rate variability up. It shifts our parasympathetic nervous system up, which then allows us to sleep. And then we can kind of do all the stuff we've been talking about. But until we declare that we're personally more important than our illness, and you know, it's gonna be a self-fulfilling prophecy the other way.
I love that, Tom. I love it, because you really have to believe that something else is possible. And that belief opens the door to an amazing experience. Even with difficulties, it's still an amazing journey. Tom, thank you so much for sharing your life, your work, all that you've done. We could talk a lot longer. We'll have to do this again, but thank you truly. And thank you for all that you've gone through in order to learn to help other people.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And thanks for everyone listening. And thanks for all the work you've done. You've always been, it's so nice to be able to have a conversation because you've always been such an inspiration. And now we get to hang out and do things. So yeah, let's do it again soon.
And the skiing's coming, right?
Definitely skiing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom.